Hi, this is RN Bhaskar from BKBB, an acronym for Bhaskar Ki Business Party. For the last 8 months, we've been running a channel which brings you every week policy analysis, business stories, and even conversations. And just about 2.5 weeks ago, we began this channel which talks about news, not exactly news, but news behind the news. And we pick up 2 or 3 headlines every day because we think that those headlines matter and you should know what is happening behind what the papers tell you. And today I'm joined by my co-anchor, Katya. Katya is there, and Katya will talk to you about a few things and I'll talk to you about a few things. Do remember to click on the subscribe channel. Do click the like button. We are enthused when we see more likes coming up. And yes, there's a question answer session at the end of this discussion. Please post your questions there. We'll try to answer some of them. And finally, please remember that every morning at 8:15 we bring you news behind the news. Let me begin with first of all, let me tell you what are the 3 stories we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Reserve Bank of India and the rupee, mostly from the state of the rupee, state of the economy address by the RBI yesterday. Then we're going to talk about how India is going to start sourcing its yarn imports from the USA in an attempt to reduce the trade balance, which is negative for the US. And lastly, we're going to talk about household savings and why that is causing a lot of headaches for economists. And let me begin with the first story. The Reserve Bank of India, in its State of the Economy address yesterday, focused largely on the rupee. And it said that the rupee is still overvalued, which effectively means that the rupee could depreciate further. It talks about how the rupee has been sliding and it tries to give reasons why it is sliding. It does not talk about that there are other reasons why the rupee has slid. The rupee was once upon a time supposed to be 40 rupees to a dollar. When this government came to power in 2014, they went around everywhere saying that the previous government was inept and they would bring the rupee to 40 rupees a dollar. Effectively, it meant that the rupee had potential. Its real value could be more than what it was at that time. Then it went past the 60 rupees that the previous government had. Then it went climbed and climbed and climbed. Today it's almost about 87 rupees to a dollar. And it's going to climb even further in the RBI's latest reports. And we believe, to my knowledge, a rupee becomes weaker when imports are greater, exports are less. Our exports are sliding year after year after year. And when you can't export, you can't expect the rupee to be strong. The second reason why the rupee is weaker is because government policies, especially for a product like gold, which is sentimental for India, still invites a duty rate of 6% and GST, making gold extremely attractive for smuggling. Look at the number of seizures. And the third reason is other policies that do not allow industrial production to go up. If industrial production does not go up, the rupee will remain weaker. Anyway, that's a crisis that we're going to face. Let's see what happens. And now let me go ahead to Katya's story, where Katya is going to talk about yarn.
Thanks a lot, sir. So as usual, there's a trade war going on. So there are alliances being formed, and looks like India is going to go towards the US side of it, as opposed to China, Mexico, and Canada, who are trying to form a cartel. So this is a source-based story from ET, which basically says that India is looking to shift the sourcing of certain products to US from other countries. For example, we import a lot of apples, a lot of fruit from Turkey that probably will go to they might go to US now, and we also import a lot of high end fiber from China, and that could also shift to US as well. The idea behind it is to plug the wide trade gap between India and the US. Obviously, we are an export oriented nation, and US is actually a consumption center, but this shift is going to change the way how things work between the countries, especially China, because we are reducing exposure to China. When there is a cartel forming shows that we are clearly siding with the US. As of now, this is information has only come from sources. There's no official confirmation of this, but if this happens, it's going to be a very big shift from the way India operates, because earlier we've been known for our diplomatic way of dealing with Russia and the Ukraine war. Now, not so much. So, just to give a number, India's FY24 merchandise trade surplus with the US was $35.33 billion, and we'll see how much of it can be plugged with fruit and synthetic fiber. Back to you, sir. We've been discussing this topic a lot. What do you think we should do? Uh,
Well,
is it a
well,
good idea to take sides in the war?
Katya, it's a good story. It's a very important story they brought up because it means three things. It means one, India is buckling under US pressure. Two, when you decide to transfer sourcing of goods from one country to another, it means you're moving from a cheaper source to a more expensive source. India is already uncompetitive in the export market. We are going to become more uncompetitive. Three, when you have a government agreeing to buy many other things from the USA, especially defense items, arms that have failed in Ukraine and in Israel in the Gaza war, you're buying second-rate equipment, which has not proved its efficacy in the theaters of war that are currently going on. We are going to be in trouble because of such buckling down under US pressure. You're right over there. It's worrisome. And then let me go to the third story. And the third story is about household savings. You look at the first chart on the left hand side, and you'll see that for the last 3 years, household savings are slipping and slipping and slipping. The RBI believes and the government believes that it's because money is being diverted to stock markets, money is being diverted to financial markets. It doesn't mention the primary reason household savings are also slipping because there's very little purchasing power with the middle class. The government's taxed individuals on the one hand, it's not created enough employment opportunities on the other. So then you're caught where markets don't grow, job opportunities don't grow, existing jobs disappear, and the government's taxation policies hurt customers. So you'll see a situation where even if you look at the third chart, which talks about deposits, I think it's that the spike in deposits for banks is a little optimistic. Because talk to banks and they'll tell you that this March end we're having a big trouble in trying to meet our deposit targets. Why are deposit targets falling? Industry is not doing very well. It's not doing very well because the industry policies are not good. Many industries are fleeing India and going overseas. So you have the middle class being squeezed. You have industry not taking off. Investment policies have made sure that investments are not very strong. We are going to see a further reduction in household savings unless trends are reversed. The need to reverse trends is very urgent. And that, in a way, brings me to the end of today's three stories. And do remember, you have to click. We would like you to click the subscribe button. We'd like you to click the like button because we want more subscribers. And yes, we would like to be encouraged with your likes so that we can get better day by day. And that gets me to the third part of today's podcast, and that is, are there any questions that have come from the audience? One of the viewers has said a question: are there any chances of the rupee getting stronger? Well, that's an interesting question. Till now, the rupee has become weaker and weaker and weaker. But there's a slim chance that the rupee may become stronger, not because it's stronger, but because the American dollar may fall. If you look at Powell's reports just last night, he points out that the US may face one of its highest inflation, and it also talks about how productive levels are likely to decline, which in turn means that the US dollar will fall. So if the US dollar falls, the rupee will get stronger, not because it is stronger, but because the US dollar becomes weaker. However, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Last time when the US dollar fell, the Indian rupee fell faster. It's like we are competing to go downwards. And that has to stop. Okay, that was question number one. I can see a second question coming up. If you import yarn from USA, does that mean that customers in India will have to depend on more expensive imports? Exactly. And that is what I mentioned in the discussion after Katya's story. It is just that we buy from China not because China is a friend. We buy from China because it makes sense. In pharmaceuticals, they buy APIs from China because using those APIs we can export. We want to improve textile exports, but it hurt textile imports if India decides to put a duty on Chinese imports so that India is compelled to buy from USA. You're cutting your nose to spite your face. And so, let's see what happens. The third question: will inflation continue to rage on if the rupee remains under pressure? Yes, inflation is likely to go on. Not only because the rupee is under pressure. The rupee is under pressure because of other factors. It's under pressure because we are not creating enough jobs. We are not creating enough goods and services. Remember, inflation comes down to the more goods and services. We are having a further reduction in the rupee, and there's more inflation because the biggest earner in India is the government. Its taxes increase by 10%, 15%, 18% year after year, when salaries have not increased at that rate. The government must learn how to control its expenditure. So yes, you are going to have a problem there also. And there's another question: must young students rethink their plans to study abroad because the rupee issues? Yes, it should. But India should look at things very carefully. If you go to America, you pay almost 5 times to 10 times the fees that you pay in China. And America, which used to be the cradle of democracy and freedom of speech, is now hurting freedom of speech just because some students protest against a country that America is very fond of. Or let's say not America, the majority is not very fond of it, but Trump is very fond of Israel. And look at what happened to the Columbia student. He was a permanent visa holder, and just because they protested, they're trying to export him. The courts have moved in and said, you can't do this. For the first time in the last 2 years, police are being sent into campuses. American universities may suffer because good teachers are likely to leave. The first set of good teachers left during the Iraq war when they shifted to Canada. You might find a second group of good teachers leaving, and this time they'll go to other countries, especially Europe or in China. China's rankings in universities has been increasing year after year, and China's cheaper. And anyone who studies in China will be valuable for Indians who want to trade with China. And when you have the largest populations in the world, whether governments like it or not, people will trade. So watch that space very carefully. Indians need to think of going overseas, A, because your own education standards are plummeting, and B, because your rupee is weaker, you need to be careful at where you're spending the rupee. Look for the best education at the cheapest price. And that, in a way, brings me to the end of today's podcast. Thank you for being with us. We like to have you here every morning at 8:15. Please be there tomorrow morning also at 8:15. And do click the subscribe button. Do click the like button. And do give us your comments on what we should be doing so that we become better and better day by day. Have a great day. Have a wonderful day. And thank you once again.